Individuals are born, apparently, some of them, with problem personalities. They are born with one characteristic, which perhaps dominates all others, and this is an absolutely inflexible will. As small children, these become almost impossible to handle. No matter how they are punished or corrected, they are merely embittered, and this will becomes increasingly belligerent. Instead of fitting in, they are tyrants from the cradle. And quite early in the career of such a child, it usually outwits its parents. From this time on, the parent is helpless. And there are many, many instances now in which parents are completely subjected, are completely dominated by 4 or 5-year-old children. The parent does not know which way to turn. Very seldom does psychology do any particular good in these cases, because the individual, the child, or the growing adolescent is already absolutely conditioned against change. He was born with a determination to do exactly as he pleases. He is ruthless and antisocial. His own ambitions are the only things that are important to him. This pressure he has undoubtedly brought with him into this life. It is the pressure perhaps of some old Roman legionnaire, or perhaps the pressure of some conniving metagee. We don't know. But it is the product of a kind of individual who has always been ruthless, has always been completely self-centered, and completely determined to have his own way. Under a normal social pattern, this type of individual does finally meet his master. He meets his master in the collective. He meets his master in society around him. If society is strongly organized as a constructive ethical pattern, the individual who attempts to break through is so heavily penalized that he is usually forced into line. But today's society is so completely weak that it exercises no controlling power on the individual. Instead of society making this individual re-evaluate his patterns, society simply becomes despairing of him and allows him to go on his way to become a potential Hitler or Mussolini. There is no controlling this situation socially any longer. And the failure of society to support parental discipline also makes the task of trying to guide this child doubly hopeless in its own home. Now, this relentless person, this absolute example of mental drive, is not always dedicated to worldly matters. There undoubtedly are many levels of this intensity. Only a slight degree. Some to a measure that is practically paranoid. But this drive, this determination to do what we will to do, up to a certain degree, is now regarded as an asset. It is the indication of success. That type of person is going to get there. He's going to make his million. What he does to other people in making it, no one really cares anymore. The victim is no longer listened to. What the individual does to himself, he will not realize until he has done it, and the hurt is so terrible he does not know what to do. But these drives appear in almost every bracket of human life. They may be the drive behind some post-impressionistic school of art. The drive may be a rugged determination to write on moral literature and become famous as a result. The individual simply driving his own viewpoint to its extremity. It may lead to unreasonable and unjustified political ambitions, in which the person not being really equipped for leadership becomes a ruthless dictator over his victims. It may be an industrial drive or a labor drive. It may be almost anything that you can think of. It can be a drive in education. It can be a drive in religion. But what it does in our way of life, which seems to me to be highly significant, is that this drive, which is itself usually abnormal, nearly always does bring the individual to the top. And therefore, more and more of our institutions are being led by individuals who are completely dominated by egocentric drive. These people, whenever they do attain positions of authority, become dogs in mangers. They reach a point where they can block almost any activity contrary to their own drive. We have, therefore, in leadership a great number of highly ambitious people driven by discomfort or unhappiness in themselves, completely undisciplined so far as true public responsibility is concerned, and with no basic incentives to really accomplish good, unless that good is merely the fulfillment of their own drive. This type of thing has led to the foundation of religions. It has led to many different difficult and complicated situations. But it nearly always does manifest as a developing infallibility complex. The person accepts his own drive as the final authority in the universe. Nearly all these driven people are actually deficient in religious insight. They are nearly always persons who have neglected the cultivation of such qualities as might make them of great enduring benefit to society. Among those in various walks of life who are the most difficult, the most opinionated, the most relentless in their determination to have their own way, the most sour and miserable when life's problems close in on them, and the quickest to blame other people for their own disasters are the ones who have practically no religious groundwork. These people have no respect for that which is superior. Had they been religious, they would have subordinated their drive to religious consideration. They would have allowed deity to remain the final leader. But these mind-driven people have usurped the prerogatives of deity. Therefore, they do not believe in any deity stronger than their own purpose. And wherever we find this lack of religious leadership within these people, where we find these people unable to bend to the simple process of prayer, where they are unwilling to call upon divine help for insight, for understanding, for clearer guidance in the affairs of the mind, where these humbler attitudes are totally lacking, the individual is well on a way to a drive power complex, a mania. Though in ordinary ways of life, of course, this mania is subordinated to circumstances beyond the control of many of these people. All these mind-driven persons will not become dictators. They will not change the destiny of vast collectives. Only a few have the tremendous drive even to do this. But what these people will accomplish, wherever the drive is a state of personal unhappiness. They're going to be unhappy because these drives, which are unreasonable, are going to meet opposition. The individual is going to find that there is a world against him. He is going to find that his various determinations and decisions and solemn pronouncements are of very little interest to anyone but himself. And when this person who feels the drive of infallibility within his own nature, when this irresistible force embodied in a person meets the inevitable obstacle, we have the psychotic. This person who is frustrated in his drive becomes embittered. He takes the attitude usually that his drive is of universal importance, that the failure of others to realize this is a crime against him, that it becomes his duty, therefore, to revenge himself upon those who will not accept his intensities. We have a large area of people suffering from this kind of situation. I've talked to many of them, and they tell the sad story of their lives. One of the most common phrases in old times is said to have been one man who went through all these various vicissitudes, and then he asked that an epitaph, a very simple one, be placed on his gravestone. And it said on the epitaph, "John Jones, born to suffer." Now this was his real conviction. He was born to suffer. He complained all his life, and his name is Legion, that he was never understood. It never occurred to him that he never understood anybody else. If he had understood others, he would understand why he was not understood, but that he never got that far. Other people were simply stubborn dumbwits. They did not see it his way. As opposition to his way increased, he came also under a delusion. It seemed to him impossible that a great number of persons should object to him in identically the same way. The only answer could be that they were organized against him. So these kind of persons are quite certain, in many instances, that there are malicious movements in society which exist only to discomfort them. It never occurs to these people that they are not the victim of conspiracy. They are simply the victim of the fact that a great many people do not like what they are doing. And of course, whether they realize it or not, these power-driven individuals are constantly disagreeing with everybody else. So it becomes a very pressureful situation. Having set up one of these aggressive mental patterns, not necessarily a career pattern by any means, sometimes not a clearly defined pattern at all, but only the inevitable determination to have their own way, to do exactly what they please, with the understanding and the inevitable that what they please is the best for all concerned. This type of person starting out in life is bound to have difficulties. Nearly every situation they get into goes sour. Marriage fails, children turn from them, they do not advance properly in their business, they do not have the insight and judgment to be practical. They are sometimes chasing forlorn causes, and then in the end find that they are bankrupt. These persons, therefore, gradually come to the conclusion that the world is against them. Actually, in most instances, the world does not know that they exist. The people who are against them are people either like themselves who have their own will patterns they wish to fulfill, or else they are individuals who have been variously offended by the obnoxiousness of this mentally driven determination. In any event, these persons who are constantly in trouble, constantly unhappy, always right, and always misunderstood, are really the products of this strange mind-driven situation. These individuals apparently cannot change their own thinking. To them, to change their minds would be heresy. It would cause them to say to themselves, if I do not fulfill my own thinking, I will be false to truth, because they have identified their own thinking as ultimate truth. This has been one of the tragedies that have burdened a number of religious organizations. The complete satisfaction in themselves that they and they alone are the possessors of spiritual truth, and that anyone that differs from them must be destroyed. Because if we allow anyone to have a contrary opinion to truth, we are violating our own responsibility toward truth. It gets to be very complicated, and for the most part, extremely unkind. But in small matters, it is the same way. The individual who is always right is always miserable. Nature does not reward us for this kind of attitude. It shows us again and again that there are changes that we must make, and nature will continue to plague us until we make these changes. But when the time comes and we cannot endure the consequences of our own attitudes any longer, we do not seem to have the wit or wisdom to try to change. Probably 50 years ago we would have had this courage, but now we do not have it. We would have had it in the years gone by because we were living in a generation in which many people were self-disciplined, and self-discipline was a status symbol. In a community where people live well-regulated lives, the individual had better conform or leave. Today, however, the status symbol is this rugged individualism. The status symbol is not to be disciplined, but to try to win this battle of everyone forcing their own purposes on everyone else. So with no society pressure to protect the individual or to induce him to a better attitude, nothing in his education that really impels him to be a well-ordered person, nothing in his industry to inspire idealism, nothing in his business policies to inspire morality or ethics, and very little in his personal life to inspire genuine affection and friendship, the individual does not change. Instead of this, he takes upon himself the attitude that he is the helpless victim of people who will not see it his way. And the only answer to the problem is Milltown or something of this nature. He finally reaches a state of nervous disintegration under pressure, which forces him to seek barbiturates or hypnotic drugs or something to lower pressure. This is only, however, the numbing of pressure. And if this process is used long enough, we will have an almost complete destruction of the interior nervous system. Then we really have the individual who has the jitters, who can do nothing about it, who cannot even control his own words or his own thoughts, who cannot do any of the common things of life any longer, because he is a bundle of palpitations and miseries. So ultimately, you cannot cure with a pill that which belongs essentially to the mastery of our own disposition by conscious effort. The way in which the Eastern philosopher tries to approach this situation is to give the individual the most constructive and simple way out of his emergency that it is possible to imagine. But the proud individual, the one most in need of this, is most reluctant to attempt it. Also, a philosophic approach to life bursts as a surprise upon an unprepared world. We have no background for the importance of self-control in this generation. We have no realization of the dignity of relaxation. We have no experience in how to attain it. Instead of being trained in it and schooled in it and perhaps have departed from it for a few years, only to return finally, we are now having something forced upon us that we've never even heard of before. Something that we never regarded as valuable. Something that perhaps we associated with strange, distant, heathen customs. Because of actual lack of discipline, lack of background, we find the adult faced with a mind that is already deeply set in its own purposes, has no inclination to change of itself. Even if we manage to get a new thought into it, this thought is drowned in the old mental processes. This thought holds for a few hours or a few days perhaps, but the old policies close in again. The individual cannot cope with the ruts, with the habit patterns, with the deep pressures that have practically dominated his thinking from his first conscious hour. Bewildered, confused, uncertain as to policy, realizing that something is desperately wrong, but not knowing what to do with it, the individual seeks here and seeks there for some answer to this drive which is gradually forcing the decline and destruction of his own mental and emotional life. And of course, when millions of people suffer from the same problems, we have national and racial and international emergencies. We have situations that are so completely out of control that they threaten the survival of civilization itself. So the Eastern thinking on the problem is one which we recognize, we realize, but we know is going to take a certain amount of basic conditioning. It will take a little time for the individual to gradually absorb into his consciousness the keys and patterns for his own recovery. The simplest answer, of course, to all these things is a non-effortful approach. The individual cannot lock himself in a great program of personal reformation. He cannot fight habit with habit. He cannot constantly deny pressures that he really wants to accept. He cannot talk himself out of attitudes which he wishes to believe. He wishes to believe that as an individual he is a superior person. He wishes to believe that in some way a unique destiny belongs to him. He wishes to believe that he is more correct than anybody else can ever be. He wishes to believe that his own opinions are little less than scriptural. He is convinced by his own determination that he was created for some extremely significant purpose. This purpose, however, always being consistent with his own likes and dislikes. Because he wishes to be extraordinary, he finds it extremely difficult to admit that he is ordinary. And yet actually we are all ordinary. The individual who has any essential superiority of the true kind within himself is the first to recognize that he is ordinary. It is the person who cannot be just one of many, who is always pushing and fighting his way into a psychosis. If the person in this type of situation, therefore, attempts to argue himself out of it, he will not even believe his own argument, because against the fact that he is one of millions, which is obvious, is this other hoped-for condition that he is unique and entirely different from all the others. He is willing to die for this sense of uniqueness because it flatters him. Well, it is what he wants to believe. And it is very hard to talk someone out of what he wants to believe. Even after desperate situations have set in, he still wants to believe that he is always right, and that it is other conditions that have gone sour. The Eastern philosophy gives us about the only answer that we have for this type of problem, namely that we have to get back of it. We cannot hit this problem head on. If we do, we will only aggravate all the symptoms and perhaps bring an actual mental crisis on ourselves. We have to slowly reduce the pressure of this psychic drive. Psychology takes the attitude that we reduce this pressure by opening the sluice gates of a dam or lock and allowing the water to pour out. We've done a lot of pouring lately, and it looks more like the deluge every moment. This does not seem to be the answer. The individual cannot recover from an ailment merely by extroverting that ailment and making it show more than it did before. Thus, the mere process of outpouring is not the answer. The individual has too much capacity to replenish the source of his own pressure. What seems to be the answer, therefore, is for the individual to gain greater sense of personal relaxation. Relaxation being one of many ways of getting the mind off the self. The moment you separate the mental entity from the drive force, you begin to get some constructive results. When the individual begins to be a little less concerned as to whether he is important or not, he begins to let down and show certain streaks of natural humanity. This seems to be the most effective method, is to divide interest so that the person is no longer completely bound to one immutable, inevitable track of procedure, and the other is to, by the division of interest, by the broadening of insight, by the deepening of insight, to give the individual a certain sense of relaxation. If we can inspire this person with certain religious convictions, we will do him a great deal of good, as long as he does not become involved in some kind of a fanatical movement that caters to his own natural fanatical pressures. If, however, this person can slowly become aware of other values in life, if he can reach a point where he becomes interested in something which he is forced to admit he does not understand, he may go for help on this when he will not go for help on his basic character problems. He may feel himself to be ultimately superior to everyone else in judgment, but he may still feel that he can take music lessons. He may still believe that he can go out in the mountain with a camera and learn how to take good pictures. He may still have an instinct to read poetry or good books. He may enjoy art or literature or music or poetry or the dance or something where he is not required to be the center of the stage. By learning, therefore, to be receptive in something, he gains gradually the instinct to receptivity. He begins to think of himself as a hungry creature needing nourishment, rather than as a demigod imposing his will upon everything else. Out of the contact of this person with the values and skills of precision will come very often a certain sense of orientation, a certain humbleness, a certain realization that nobody knows it all. If we can get him this far, we can do him a lot of good. Another thing that helps a great deal, of course, is the realization of the East, that psychological normalcy is not the result of extroverting the individual, but rather causing the individual to become receptive, to receive into himself the conditioning power of the universe. In other words, if the individual, instead of trying to dominate everything, will allow value to move in upon him, if he will accept the way of nature as his guide, he will very often gradually find the peace and relaxation which otherwise is denied him by his endless fight against nature, particularly against human nature. So in the East, the thinking is to try to reduce this psychic drive, this situation of the individual continually harassed by the fact that life does not agree with him, reducing this pressure to the point where he begins to agree with life. Actually, life does not have to agree with him, and it never did. Life only agrees with him if he is right. Consequently, above self-interest must come finally obedience to that which is naturally right, naturally true, inevitably so in the universe. Eastern philosophy is concerned with this inevitable truth, the unchanging fact that regardless of what we believe, how we feel, and how we act, there is a rule. There are patterns. There are laws. And these laws, patterns, and facts impose their discipline upon the individual. If he resents this discipline, he will ultimately wreck his own life. If he accepts this discipline, he will finally achieve freedom. He will be free to do anything he wants to do, only when discipline has caused him to want to do that which is right. He is capable of earning leadership where he cannot demand it. He is able to inspire others in a natural and gentle way and achieve the fulfillment of his desires to do good, only if he follows the rules of the game. And these rules are that no one is fit to lead who has not experienced the fact of following. We cannot begin by taking over the administration of the universe or anything else. We have to begin by following. We have to learn to obey before we have the right to give orders. In nature, we have to learn to obey the universe before we are in a condition to make a treaty or to set up some pattern of relationship with that universe. Man's place in space has never been clearly defined. He is thought of only as a space conqueror. What he does not realize is that he hasn't the ghost of a chance of conquering space. Certainly he can send aircraft or projectiles to the furthest star in the solar system or in the universe, but this does not mean that he has conquered space. The only space that he can really conquer is the space between his own ears. And until he does something with this space, until he explores it, and until he solves it, it might be well for him to turn a few billions of his research funds into the mysterious curve in his own continuum, instead of worrying about the one out yonder. The individual who is power-driven, who is will-driven, who has set his jaw with an absolute determination to unchangingly fulfill his own determinations. This individual is going to be miserable from the beginning to the end of life. Now, we have millions of such people. Every family nearly has one. Some families are made up of them. Nearly every business is burdened with them. Nearly every government is being gradually corrupted by these kind of people. And yet, with a vast number of these utterly uneducated individuals who have never been actually put into society in a proper relationship, these individuals who are essentially uncivilized, we have no time for them. We pay no attention to them. When they get too troublesome, we send them to a clinic. But there is no broad pattern of preventive or corrective therapy. These individuals are simply allowed to continue in these courses because they have worn everyone else out. They apparently are utterly inflexible, and the only solution seems to be ultimate dissolution. No one can stay here indefinitely, even if he has the most rugged determination. So the death rate alone breaks up these terrible patterns. This rate also is the only thing that releases the individual who is caught in one of these patterns. And we're not too sure that it completely releases him. We're not at all sure that one caught in these patterns is not the uncontrollable child who will be coming into the world one of these days. The only answer is that the individual must in one way or another receive the inducements and the directives to change these policies. If society would prepare and provide a strong ethical environment, a great many of these borderline cases could be immediately helped. If families would give a real thought to this and a real attention to it, and the adult would not set a bad example to the young, a great deal of this could be prevented right in the family. If education emphasized these points, much could be achieved. And also, if success, the desperate thing most people are seeking for, if the highest positions of authority, if the best salaries and best jobs were for persons who were self-disciplined, not merely technically skilled, but ethically and morally integrated. If success demanded self-discipline, we would have it. But while success demands only skill, we will have factories and stores and professions in constant disruption because of the personal conspiracies, the personality conflicts of these unconditioned, undisciplined individuals. The only answer that we have is that at this time, these persons sometimes do reach a point in which their condition becomes so oppressive that they seek help. Of those who seek help, maybe 1 in 10 will accept. And these in turn may improve to varying degrees. But we have to recognize that the person who is internally demanding leadership must have within himself the enlightenment necessary. He knows whether he is truly enlightened, because if he is truly enlightened, his leadership is constructive, valuable, and usually accepted. But if he is simply pressureful, he simply creates pressures in all others who come in contact with him. If you are one of those persons who feels this tremendous drive of destiny, who simply cannot adjust, who feels these pressures mounting constantly within yourself, if you have this difficulty, Take hold of it. Don't try to be without pressure. That is not the answer. Break up your interests. Diversify your activity. Take on things you do badly and have other people help you to do them better. By this procedure, you will gradually gain a recognition that all people have certain aptitudes and abilities. That in trying to do something you know you do not do well, you have the experience of insecurity or inadequacy. And for these mind-driven persons, the experience of admitting that there are things they do not know and cannot immediately control will frequently give them an outlet. Also, if these same persons can be inspired to simple study of quiet philosophic principles, they will gradually build thought forms within themselves which may modify some of these pressures. If there's any possible way for pressureful people lower the circumstances which cause the pressure, modify ambitions to a reasonable degree, think the problem of life through from beginning to end. And remember that most of the things you are pressing so desperately to attain belong to this world and will be left behind when you leave it. Things that have no permanence, no enduring validity, should not become the cause of inordinate attachment and pressure. The thing that is really worthy of our deepest consideration is that part of our nature which must go with us when we go. And in the building of character, we build for final success. Whereas in building only for the achievement of immediate goals, if we would think even for a moment, we would realize that these immediate ends are transitory, impermanent, inconclusive, and finally unsatisfactory. Think it through. If you really do have a smart mind, use it. Think through the problem of your own existence and the futility that underlies all pressure. That this pressure is not necessary. There is only one very slight pressure that we need in order to live reasonably well, and that is just the quiet, gentle determination to contribute simple happiness, good, kindness, and friendship to the world in which we live. Beyond this, all pressures are futile and lead inevitably to the great killers which are destroying life at the present time. And whether the killer is a heart attack or a world war, it represents pressure. Pressure that is not productive. Pressure that has never produced anything but misery. And pressure which you cannot afford. Use your common sense, use your very mental strength, not to fight your pressures, but to understand through them to that which is the inevitable, that these pressures are unimportant. That you cannot afford to sacrifice your life to them, nor can you afford to sacrifice the happiness of those around you to success which itself is impermanent and insecure. Enrich the general insight of what is truly valuable. Live a more contemplative life if you can. If you cannot do this easily, then live for the fulfillment of some moderate desire, and take out of your consciousness this sense of being a creature of a particular destiny. You were not born to suffer. You were born to grow. But when you resist growth, you suffer. And if we can get that point straight, we can solve most of the problems.